My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my ranking of Jim Carrey's filmography from worst to best. And this video might have spoilers, so there's your warning. But Jim Carrey is one of my favorite actors of all time. He was in so many movies I loved as a kid, and he's in so many movies I still love to this day. His comedic talents are just one of a kind, and he is just so truly hilarious. But he can also give really great dramatic performances as well. He is just a talent unlike anyone else in Hollywood, and let's talk about his movies, beginning with his worst one, and it's the 2009 A Christmas Carol. And I know this story is a classic, but it's never been a story I've really loved, and it's just executed in the worst possible way here. The animation is so ugly and soulless, and I found the story to be unengaging, ineffective, and just really boring. So it's my least favorite of his movies. My second worst Jim Carrey movie is going to be a real hot take, but it's Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I hated this movie. Like, it is trying to tell so many jokes in every single minute, and almost every single one falls completely flat. So it's not just unfunny, it's actively annoying, and I really hate Sonic as a character. And then we get Shadow in this movie, and there is real potential with his story, but the execution just sucks, and I really did not care for anything going on. I didn't care about any of these characters, and I just thought it was a failure on every single level. So that's why it's his second worst movie. His third worst movie is the number 23, and there's some potential here, but the execution just sucks. It's a very bland and boring movie, and it's just an incoherent mess, so that's why it's his third worst. His fourth worst is The Majestic, directed by Frank Darabont, who directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, both really great movies, but his direction here just didn't land for me. There's a good movie somewhere here, but it's just so bloated and overlong, and I thought it was really boring. And then it focuses heavily on this communist plot, and it just completely lost me. I found this movie to be a very difficult watch by the end, and I would never go back to it. His fifth worst movie is going to be another hot take, I think, but it's Me, Myself, and Irene. And it's a movie I really want to like. There's plenty of potential on display, but the execution just doesn't land for me. This movie is simply not funny enough, and I really don't care for it. His sixth worst movie is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And just like the third movie, I find this movie to be so unfunny, so annoying, and the story is just poorly told. The entire wedding plot is a complete embarrassment, but this movie at least has its moments, and Idris Elba as Knuckles is a real standout. So definitely not good, but it's not atrocious. His seventh worst movie is Once Bitten, and this movie sucks. The movie looks really cheap, and the lead character, played by Jim Carrey, is just completely unlikable. Like, he is a complete piece of shit, and I didn't care about anything happening to him. I just didn't. Just a really forgettable movie that I would never check out again. His eighth worst movie is Mr. Popper's Penguins, and this follows a classic kids movie formula, but it's just done in the most empty, soulless manner, and it's just a very forgettable, a very bland movie. His ninth worst movie is I Love You, Philip Morris. And the first half is actually pretty decent. Jim Carrey and Ewan McGregor both give great performances, and they do have good chemistry. But the second half just turns into a generic conman movie, and I just checked out at that point. It completely lost me, and I really didn't care for it. His 10th worst movie is Earth Girls Are Easy. And I do actually like some of the visuals here. It's a very campy movie, and it can be really stupid in a good way. But most of the movie is really stupid in a bad way, and it's just not as funny as it needed to be. And the main romance, to me, was just odd. Like, yeah, no. No thanks. Yeah, this movie sucks. But now we get to the ones I actually enjoy. So his 20th best movie is Fun with Dick and Jane. And it's so weird because when I actually watched this movie, I just got laid off. So, I don't know, there's something really relatable about the story being told here. And yeah, like, it's decent enough. It's entertaining. There's nothing great going on here, but it's a perfectly fine, serviceable movie. I'm not too passionate about it either way. His 20th best movie is Sonic the Hedgehog, and I actually think this movie is fine. You can have fun with it. Sonic works better in this movie compared to the sequels because this is a typical buddy road trip movie, and I think his personality works better for that formula. There's some entertaining action, and it's a decent setup to these characters and this universe. Yeah, and Jim Carrey does do a really good job here, so yeah, fine. My 18th favorite movie of his is going to be one that I've actually grown quite soft with over the past few years, but it's Batman Forever. And I actually like Batman and Robin more than this movie, and I got some issues. My biggest one being Tommy Lee Jones' performance because he is just too much here. He is really annoying, and it just feels like he's competing with Jim Carrey to see who can be more over the top. And at a certain point, it's like, enough, enough. The Robin plot really does suck. I'm not the biggest fan of Val Kilmer as Batman. I think he's really bland. And I don't know, the Nicole Kidman character is so weird. I don't really know what to think of her, but Joy Schumacher's direction is what elevates this movie. It looks incredible. It really does. Even with some shitty CGI, there is a vision on display, and the production design, the costumes, the colors, this movie just pops, and there's so many images I can remember of Jim Carrey sitting in his throne, just getting everyone's memories, and yeah, and Jim Carrey does do a good job here. So the movie is flawed, but maybe it's nostalgia. I have a soft spot for it. My 17th favorite Jim Carrey movie is Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, and This is a really stupid movie, but it's also a really funny movie. Not as good as the first one, but that vinyl butt scene is an all-timer. My 16th favorite movie of his is The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, and I actually find this movie to be underrated. I enjoy Steve Carell and Steve Buscemi and Olivia Wilde and Jim Carrey here. I do think there's a good story here about someone who needs to become a better person. I like the entire magician aspect, and that final scene is just comedy gold. So it doesn't quite get to greatness, but it's a very easy watch. My 15th favorite movie of his is Dumb and Dumber 2, and just like Ace Ventura 2, it's a really funny and stupid movie. It's just not as good as the original. This movie is definitely too long, and the plot can feel quite convoluted. If they trimmed out 30 minutes, I feel like the movie would have improved significantly, but still a good watch. My 14th favorite movie of his is Man on the Moon, and this is one of Jim Carrey's best performances. He just becomes Andy Kaufman perfectly, and it's really impressive to watch him here. And I also love how this movie gets you to understand why Andy Kaufman's humor just felt so significant in the time. And it's not a movie I rewatch often, but it is a good, solid biopic. My 13th favorite movie of his is Kick-Ass 2. And I've got some issues here with the pacing and a couple moments, but I do like the story being told. They actually give Hit Girl quite a bit more depth, and they got me to care for her even more. Like, she is this girl whose childhood was taken away from her, and she loves everything that her dad did for her, but it also kind of messed her up, and I thought there was a real complexity on display. The entire plot of Kick-Ass joining this superhero group is entertaining. There is some really good action here. I love some of the music. It's well directed by Jeff Radler. It's not as good as the original, but it's still a very good time. My 12th favorite movie of his is Yes Man. And this is a great story with a very strong message about being open to life and its opportunities. And there's something here that really resonated with me. And the movie can be quite funny, but it's also heartfelt. And the soundtrack is also quite good. When I was a kid, I watched this movie, and that scene where he sings Jumpo by Third Eye Blind got me completely obsessed with that song for just the longest time. And the final joke in this movie is peak comedy. It really is. I got some issues. But yeah, Jim Carrey's great here. Zooey Deschanel is good. Terrence Stamp does a good job. Bradley Cooper's character is really weirdly written, if you ask me, but it's a good time. My 11th favorite Jim Carrey movie is Lemony Snicket, A Series of Unfortunate Events. And this movie is so well directed by Brad Sibling. Like, this movie looks and sounds incredible. The production design, the CGI, the costumes, the makeup, the cinematography. It's such a well-crafted movie. And it's really well acted, especially with Jim Carrey as Count Olaf. And there's a good story here about how neglect can really hurt kids. And the movie can also be quite dark, but also very funny. Especially that opening scene with the happiest elf. And as someone who grew up reading these books, I've always enjoyed this movie. But that said, This movie is very segmented where it feels like book one, then it feels like book two, then it feels like book three, and then it feels back to book one. Like you can feel the segmented feeling, so the pacing is really off, but I still really like this movie. But now onto the top 10, and the 10th best one is Horton Hears a Who. And I like this movie. I really do. The first two acts are very enjoyable. They're an easy watch. Jim Carrey and Steve Carell does a great job, but some of the humor can feel a little too catered for kids. So, why would this be number 10? Well, let me tell you. Because the final act to this movie is one of the best in cinema history, and no, I am not kidding. The final act of this movie is so thrilling and so tense and entertaining and emotional, and it just completely delivers. The score by John Powell is magnificent, and when all the Who's are just, we are here, we are here, we are here, and how that translates into this musical score, and there's that scene with the male riding the bike, and you can hear the we are here, and the music is just so good, and it reminds me why I love movies. And then they get up to the record player, and Steve Carell is just like, can they hear us? And Horton's like, no. And then the male turns to Jojo. No matter what happens, I couldn't have asked for a better son. And then Jojo grabs the tube and he climbs up and the music kicks back up. It's just so good. It really is. I got some issues with this movie, but the perfection of that ending, holy shit, it just leaves you on a high. So that's why it's number 10. My ninth favorite Jim Carrey movie is one of his most underrated ones, and it's The Cable Guy. And this movie can be funny, but it's actually a really dark story, and it's about how showing kindness to strangers can get really out of control, and there is a psychologically effective element here. Well, someone like a cable guy, or electrician, or a plumber could ruin your life if you really pissed them off. And I thought Matthew Broderick did a great job. Jim Carrey gives a great performance. Is it Leslie Mann who's in this movie as well? I think so, but such a unique, interesting, and effective movie that kind of stays with you for a while. So, yeah, I love it. My eighth favorite Jim Carrey movie is Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, and this movie is really stupid, but it's also really funny and really quotable. Not every joke lands, and it can be a little too over the top, but Jim Carrey's physical performance here is just so good, and there are just so many scenes that get me laughing out loud. So I really enjoyed this. My seventh favorite Jim Carrey movie is another Dr. Seuss adaptation, and it's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And Jim Carrey does a great job here. He's really funny. I like how this movie expands upon the original story. I think it does so incredibly well. It's a very entertaining movie. But Ron Howard's direction, holy shit! Like, Ron Howard is actually kind of a shitty director, if you ask me. But his direction here is lively and filled with personality and life, and the production design and the makeup. Like, it's so good here. And it's the one of the few times where his direction really stands out. And yeah, it's a movie that tells a classic story perfectly. So I love it. My sixth favorite Jim Carrey movie, you know what? This might actually be his most underrated one, and it's Bruce Almighty. Because, yes, this movie is funny. Jim Carrey does a great job. Morgan Freeman does a great job. And I like the goofy plot, but shit, the dramatic elements of this movie work so incredibly well, and by the end, I'm in tears watching this movie. There is something very profound and beautiful here about human nature, and when he's willing to let Jennifer Aniston go, I don't know, it just hits me in the feels. There are so many moments here that feel powerful, and there's I don't know, like, as funny and as goofy and as over the top this movie is, it just has those moments of pure movie magic that just elevate it to the next level, and I love it. I really do. My fifth favorite Jim Carrey movie is The Mask, which is one of my favorite superhero movies at the same time. Like, this movie knows why Jim Carrey is so good and leans into that as much as possible. His Looney Tunes performance here is just fantastic, and it makes me laugh throughout. But I also love how this movie gets legitimately dark by the end when Dorian gets the mask. That terrified me as a kid, and I think it ends on a very exciting note. But I think there's also some depth to this movie about who someone really is and who they choose to show to everyone else. And I love how that ties into, the two different love interests here. And yeah, there was some smart writing involved, and it's just a fun, goofy movie. I loved it as a kid, and I still love it now. My fourth favorite Jim Carrey movie is Lyle Lyle, and this is just a great premise, told so incredibly well. And the thing is, the script kind of seems a little mundane, but Jim Carrey just gives a super over-the-top performance where he goes 246%, and he makes this movie into a Looney Tunes cartoon, and it's so funny and it's so great when he's trying to say the pen is blue, and when he beats himself up in the bathroom. Like, there is plenty of hilarious moments, but just like Bruce Almighty, what really elevates this movie for me is the character arc of Fletcher Reed, and there is some real emotion at the end of this movie. When Fletcher realizes how shitty of a person he is, and he just shouts to the judge, "I hold myself in contempt." Like, that's a really powerful moment, and I love this movie, I really do. My third favorite Jim Carrey movie is The Truman Show, and the premise here is just great, and it feels fully explored, and it's kind of funny, but it also has plenty of dramatic weight to it as well, and it's just so unique and interesting, and it's a movie you pick up on more and more the more times you watch it. Jim Carrey gives one of his best performances here. Shit, who's the actor? Isn't Noah Emmerich? He does a really good job. Laura Linney, I think, is here, and she does a really good job. Ed Harris is great, and it's just one of those movies that's super entertaining and so weird and unique and meaningful, and I love it. I really do. My second favorite Jim Carrey movie is Dumb and Dumber, and this movie is just hilarious to me. It makes me laugh. Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? Statistically, most people actually die on the way to the airport, and so you're saying there's a chance. Like, I could quote this movie all day long, and I have watched it so many times, and I still laugh out loud. Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels just give peak comedy performances, and this is a movie I could watch any day, in any mood. It's just so fucking good. But Jim Carrey's best movie was actually a very easy pick, because it's not just his best movie, It is one of the best movies ever made, and it's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And this movie is one that I loved when I first saw it, but over time, I have grown to love it even more. This is such a beautiful, brilliant, heartbreaking, profound exploration of love and life, and I just get so much from this movie. How the relationships in our life shape the people we become. And there's just so much emotional weight present in every scene. And there's just a constant sadness over what's past and what is. And it just explores regret, and it recontextualizes stuff constantly throughout. And it also shows you the highs of love and the lows, and it's just a movie that just hits me so hard. When he's in the library and he's like, I've got your speech memorized. I had you pegged, didn't I? You had the entire human race pegged. And then, she says, remember me? And she just vanishes. Like just this beautiful memory gone, just like that. Or when they're at the house and she says, what if we stayed this time? And they have one last kiss. This movie just moves me. It is such a powerful movie. It really is. And Jim Carrey gives his best performance ever here. Kate Winslet does a really great job. Kirsten Dunst and Mark Ruffalo, Tom Wilkinson, Elijah Wood all do a great job. And I love how you're focused on Joel and Clementine's story. But then the movie pulls the rug underneath, and the Kirsten Dunst and Mark Ruffalo and Tom Wilkinson story adds so much to this movie as well. And then the Elijah Wood storyline as well, and how he's trying to force this love, how he's trying to manipulate Clementine. Like, this movie is so brilliantly structured, and it's so thought-provoking, and there's just so much attention given to each detail, and it's a movie that if you break it down, it is just, wow, it's just truly brilliant. And I love the direction by Michel Gondry. It is so stylish and unique, and it can also be a very funny and weird movie, and the score by John Bryan is just perfection. So I love so many of Jim Carrey's movies, but this one is just his best. It's as good as movies get. So that is my list, but what is yours? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos soon. And Gavin, out.